Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Max Rounds 30 podcast, where there is no overtime. Once again, and actually better than last week, we actually have Koi this time. Koi, why don't you show us what you got wearing? What are you wearing right now?
I'm wearing this fantastic, koi onesie I got on. I look kind of like a cow, but I swear these are fins.
They're fins, not udders.
Yes,
And
definitely fins.
that was the result of his Twitter poll he made earlier today. And then we
Yes.
also have Jeff once again from Dust to US. Hello. And then
I bought this jersey with my own money. I'm not a sale, I promise.
okay, and he's cutting out a little bit, but we hear him for the most part. But here I am as well. I am from UWW Esports. I can never tell what I want to call myself, so like take that at face value. So all right, well, we've got 30 minutes to get into our show today. Let me get that timer started. We've got quite a bit to talk about. And let's get things started off with the CS Summit 8 closed qualifiers. So we've had a couple of people lose out literally like 20 minutes ago, and for once we're recording a show on a Monday, so we're like kind of relevant for the rest of this week. So let's get started with like Exersalt's results. I mean, they've been playing pretty well throughout this qualifier. They've haven't really had too
They had a
really
pretty
been
easy
too
run.
much.
They smashed two Brazilian teams, made their way to the main. I think it was a very expected outcome.
They're looking good though. It's nice to see that they haven't lost steam at least.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
they put, Godsent, like, no one really had any expectations for them, but against Pain, like, they just put Pain in the ground. Like, I don't think it wasn't very competitive. Like, that's what I'm wanted to see from Extra Salt, that they used their European adventure well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the two teams that are officially in as well, we do have Exersalt who has qualified in, and we also have Pain. So Pain, they beat RBG, and then they paint Benny's Bears, and then we have, I believe, two more matchups before we see the remaining two in. But the two teams that have fallen out are RBG and then Triumph. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about those two teams and why we think they've failed so far. And let's start that off with Triumph.
Honestly, Triumph still has, yet to really hit that stride. And maybe that's because they haven't had a lot of practice with the newest rendition of their roster. But hopefully through a little bit of time and elbow grease, it'll all be solved over there in the Triumph camp. The loss of Tack also hits them hard.
Definitely. I mean, they wouldn't have been able to use them for this event. He wouldn't have been able to be in the server with them or in the same room. But I think we all kind of expected them to likely lose to Oplano, but the loss to Godsend was really disappointing to me, because even though there was moments of individual brilliance, especially from like Cynic, and I think Shake Zula had overall pretty good event. Like, they just looked pretty flat, and they looked pretty out of it against Godsend, which was disappointing to me, because I do think Godsend are a bit of a paper tiger right now, in the sense that their players don't necessarily equal like the team of the caliber you expect them to be.
So I think I have some relatively, I wouldn't call them hot takes by any means, but when it comes to, at least I was just listening to Darth Mike on his, was like, totally,
The Premier Power Hour. Yeah.
Premier Power Hour. I've been forgetting that name repeatedly for the last couple of days, but on the Premier Power Hour, he was talking about how with Triumph kind of being in a little bit of a shaky position right now, he talked about, I believe it was him and Munster were talking about this, and basically like it came down to where like Munster was speaking from experience, saying if you don't know where your org is, that adds like another layer of stress that just completely shatters your focus. And I think that could be contributing to, I certainly think that's a factor contributing
Definitely.
to them playing the way they are. But also, I'll add one more note before I hand it off. I think Godsent is actually playing a lot better recently. I think it would be silly to say that they aren't playing very good, at least in this qualifier, because sure, they didn't show up very well up against Exersalt, but they've been playing they've been kind of finding their footing. Like Taco has been making some interesting and like good calls throughout this tournament, and Dumas has been hitting shots. So like once you add those two things together, things start to get scary. So I'll hand it off after that, though.
Now, quite. I don't know if you had a chance to watch last week's episode, but something we sort of spent a good amount of time talking on is the uncertainty around Triumph. And now, so for people who didn't have a chance to catch last week's episode, like the official party line from the camp is, no, the org's doing great. The players are, players are happy, the players are getting paid, and like we're committed to see this go throughout the year. But we talked about how that has the potential to not really be true based on a sort of series of like occurrences. The fact that they haven't really done any big announcements. They announced the departure of Tacitus, but they haven't really done like a proper announcement for Cynic. They haven't really done a proper announcement for Madam. We still sort of have unanswered questions on whether B. Wills has a permanent place on the team. We think he should, but obviously rumors at the time suggest that he might be on the way out. And just overall, how the organization's been going through like a lot of changes. They lost their general manager. They haven't really brought someone in to fill his position. So things have just been very like tumultuous in the Triumph like organization camp, and so that kind of concerns us. So I do think that it's a valid concern to think about Triumph potentially not having a future in CS:GO and how that could affect the players on the players on their team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think that Triumph is one of those orgs that is so ingrained in Counter-Strike, just in terms of their personal brand as well. I know they have that that COD Challengers team or whatever, or something COD related, but I'm pretty sure they're like one of their big claims to fame by far is that CS:GO spot that they've had for a very long time now. And to lose that would definitely be a huge hit to their identity as an org. So I don't think they're in dire straits yet. This whole like roster changing situation, it doesn't seem that bad when you consider, how normal Premier rosters work with, roster changes and things like that. But you do raise a fair argument regarding the whole management thing.
Yeah, and like it's when it comes to that too, it's like, they may not be on their way out either. It's like it's just because they don't know. I don't think the org really necessarily has a hard footing that they're sure of, like, because like I've heard that they've, like different things from them being completely set in stone to like, we've heard everything. So like when it comes to where they're actually at, it's going to be tough because like, yeah, like you said, it's a big part of who they are and their identity. So like I don't see it happening from like a marketing perspective, because that would essentially mean the end of the business, like from just like it, like, they would lose a lot of staff if they drop this. Like they would lose a lot of fans, they'd lose a lot of staff. It would just be a really dumb business to move to drop the CS team. It's either you make that work or kind of everything goes under.
To be just a downer asshole, have you ever heard the story of an organization called Chaos Esports Club? How are they doing these days?
Yes.
Not great, right?
Pretty sure that was not a direct that was an investor thing though. That wasn't a management thing. So that was like external pressures kind of.
And I mean,
and they had a and it was that,
but you're like,
a smart
kind of
business decision
point, though,
in the short.
I don't know. I just don't think anything's like off limits in terms of like, we can't say like, well, an org would never leave CS:GO. Their home is in CS:GO.
Well, that's not what I'm saying, though. What I'm saying is if they did, they would essentially not be relevant. They would lose so much relevancy because like
they would turn into the current Chaos Esports Club.
Yeah, right.
Which has like one employee who is posts on social media and says, "Hey guys, we're dead." He like.
Do they have a Siege team right now? Like, I haven't been able to figure that one out. Apparently they do, playing in Nordic Masters or something.
Like, I think it's like they're just fill out commitment, like contractual obligation to like.
Oh, we're losing you a little bit, Jeff. I'd move the mic a little closer.
I think they're just there to fulfill contractual obligations to their org and to the TO, and then they're just done. Because I mean, that Twitter is dead as a fucking doormat. Like they don't really do a whole lot these days. Okay, so now that we've done our weekly "What's Up with Triumph" talk, so as of about an hour ago, RBG dropped out of Summit and they fell to Pain and they fell to One. How we feel about that?
Sad, very sad. They are I think one roster move, maybe two moves away from being a team that will be in contention with those kinds of with in contention with teams like One or Pain. It just doesn't quite feel like they're just missing something, right? Like they all of their matchups were so close and they could have won so many of those maps, but it just feels like they were just missing that slight edge that's able to push them over that line. Because like what?
I have
like,
a counterpoint, actually. Or I
give
have,
us
I have
the
a counter
counterpoint.
argument.
Give us
So,
the counter argument.
RBG, back in the old advanced days, they were never really known for their individual skill, and they purely made themselves relevant based off of their chemistry and how much time they put in together. They are truly the definition of a team that grows better with age. That's why they don't do many roster moves unless they have to or someone moves. They're not kicking players. They're not replacing. Like, that's their thing, right? They want to take a lot of time and work out the kinks and learn how to play together. And so introducing Klasia isn't like no small task. Getting him comfortable, no small feat, and the fact that these matchups are really close against these levels of teams, like I'm happy for that. Like
I think
they've only been in Premier for like what, 2 seasons, 3 seasons most. Like this is good.
I think I'm coming down on your side on this one. I mean, remember, it has only been a couple. It's been what, like a month since Klasia came on, and so they've had to work to integrate him into Wolf's spot on the team. And so I do think they'll just continue to get better. And ultimately, I don't think anyone realistically expected them to make it into the main event. They're kind of just below like the cutoff point in terms of like the ranking of where you would see them making it in. And so I think just taking the games close was kind of what I expected. So like I'm relatively happy with this result, considering they made it through the open qualifier, they made it to the closed qualifier, they got more experience, and they're going to continue to grow as a team.
So my one counterpoint is that I think they should have beat Team One. I
Yeah.
think that is my sole counterpoint. Is that any day of the week they probably should have beat Team One. Now
That
Team
was a
One has
disappointing
been-
match.
Team One has been looking better in the RMR than they have in Premier, I'd say, and in how they looked in Europe. So maybe they're finding a bit more step. But yeah, okay. So let me rephrase. So I'm a little bit repeating a few things that I've heard from other people as far as like the maybe one or two roster moves away, but at the same time I still think that like maybe one might make sense in the future. I think this is either a waiting game, we see how they've gotten successful traditionally, and or we maybe they take that different route, we'll see. But I agree, I think we should wait and see how Klasia beds in, but I'm gonna call it here. I don't think that they're going to be reaching like the actual big events like say CS Summit, the last stage of the RMR, until they maybe make one more adjustment.
Yeah, okay. You can be a hater. I'm a
I'll
strong
be a-
believer in
And
the
I mean,
RBG
it's not
train.
even like a hater thing. Like, I mean, this happens with like a lot. This happens with a lot of teams. Like, think about it. Jake Zula had a lot of impressive projects until he that didn't necessarily like they were successful, but they weren't revelationary. And once he was able to get a couple good pieces together, then it's Jake Zula was regarded as one of the best IGLs in North America, and his teams are usually the third or fourth best team in North America. And so, I mean, there's no player I'd cut right now. I would honestly maybe give them 2 more seasons of Premier. Like I know that sounds like a lot of time, but I'm mostly happy with their progress. Another player like leaving of their own volition. Like I think they're making good progress.
All right.
So we have our 2 matches left to fill out the 2 last smart spots, and I have a feeling that we're gonna kind of all feel the same way about them. But so we have Bad News Bears versus Godsend and Oplano versus One. For me, I think I'm going with Bad News Bears and Oplano. Is there any dissent on that?
I don't have any dissent. The Bad News Bears game is going to be close.
I'm worried for them.
They looked so okay. To be fair to them, they came out and they said they just like got in their own heads for their game versus Pain. It's just like they need to be consistent and able to work around that if they're going to be reaching the main events, and like winning in Pro League. Like it's the difference between pulling a Team 1 in Pro League and like and pulling like maybe like a
an endpoint.
Correct. Like right. See, like it's just like, can you have that baseline consistency to show up and play good even if even if things aren't going completely right, like maybe John G isn't fragging out, what's the rest of the team doing? Maybe Swisher isn't fragging out, what's the rest of the team doing? It comes down to like, what players can step up to fill the roles that like where those like kind of power vacuums are created. So I think it's going to come with more experience with that team as it beds in further, but like with that matchup, I think Bad News Bears takes it, but I think it's a 2-1.
Do we know if are Bad News Bears back to practicing, standard scrim style yet, or are they still doing their scrim
I would have
list?
to assume they're just doing, scrim or doing standard practice because the whole point with them was that they didn't scrim, right?
Yep.
I think they're scrimming with Liquid and everybody.
Now that
back
Liquid
in
and
NA.
EG and Extreme Mom are back, like, surely they're scrimming with them. But
This is true.
there is a little bit of sauce here because Elige did tweet about how the teams that Liquid are like to scrim. It's like Pain, One,
RBG.
and RBG, but there's no mention of BNB. So that could just be an oversight instead. They're like it's a team with like
We're
EDR and
losing you,
Janji.
Jeff. Did you repeat that last part?
It could just be an oversight on Elige's part, where he's like, well, of course, people are going to understand that a lineup with PTR and Janji are going to be worth scrimming, but I don't know. I think they should win it, but my main worry is that like if they lose this and they miss out on the first, it starts to be like a a decline for them, like mentally, where they start being like, well, we're not playing anything until September, and then they just kind of get in their own heads and they start declining. So, hoping that they just win it and we don't have to come to that situation where they start like doubting their run through Premier last season.
Yeah, because as soon as that happens, potentially players start looking at like other offers or something like that. The inevitable one player switches to Valorant, whole roster dies is a potential like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay, so we have about 14 minutes, so we're gonna have to speed up a little bit. While all the CS
time.
all the CS Summit stuff was going on this week, ESEA managed to squeeze out a cash cup. The top 4 was Secret Club won it. Then you had Third Impact in second place, Party Astronauts in third place, and Velaz in fourth place. My main only takeaway from this is I'm kind of shocked Party Astronauts didn't win this, and it's kind of a bad look for them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
Because Velaz and Third Impact aren't really on their level, and then Secret Club, I don't think they're really on that sort of level either. So it's kind of concerning to me that they weren't able to.
Secret Club is a bit of an underdog, I think, this season. If I'm going to be completely honest, I think everybody's
they're doing good, but like inconsistency is their problem.
Right, but I think that they're definitely underdogs this season simply because everyone's like, okay, they lost Clasia, they lost, like they're not playing with like the lineup that was so good last season, but they've been putting in some pretty solid results recently, and they kind of whipped the crap out of Third Impact. So
it's like, but I don't think like Third Impact are like a Party Astronauts level as a team right now, because they're still
okay. I really like the Third Impact roster, and we'll see where they go. But this is kind of like, it's this season and next season. I think they have to prove that they deserve their spot in Premier with this lineup before they have to start considering changes. But like, who knows?
I'd put them in a similar bracket to I think RBG in that sense.
Yeah, except RBG is kind of
a little bit
themselves
better.
A little bit
I think they're like in the Party Astronaut stratum, like.
Mm-hmm. It is weird that Party Astronauts finished where they did, though. I agree.
Now, the only really other thing of note was Check fielded what could be described as like a weird roster for this. It was like the Check core you know and love, and then it was RCF and Turismo. I don't really have anything to say about that other than I don't know why that roster exists. I hope it was just like they're playing FPL together and they're like, hey, you want to go play Cash Cup? And they're like, yeah, great, fantastic. Because
it could just be the pug squad rolling up.
Because I'm just hoping. God forbid I say anything mean about Chocolate Check, because it makes them really upset and they fucking ball their eyes out, and then every time they win a match they celebrate.
You mean M&M's Esports?
Yeah,
right?
M&M's Esports. Every time they fucking win a match, they're like, "We'll see, we are trying," but I don't know. I think RCF
playoffs.
Yeah, I think RCF can pursue stronger offers even if he goes back to Brazil. I think there's stronger offers out for him out there. So I don't know. That just seems like a weird thing for him if he was looking at that as a permanent project. Not saying he is, but just something
It
to
was
be
just a
like,
weird side note from the Cash Cup, yeah.
yeah, weird tale that might not go anywhere. Speaking of Brazilian teams, so we have received somewhat confirmation that Imperial have pulled out of the of Advanced after there was much rejoicing that they were going to play it, and maybe much fear on the behalf of the American teams. Now, it's weird in the sense that like no one has publicly said anything, but what I've been kind of getting, like the background noise in the scene is of like Imperial screw the team over. Now, I don't know what that could really mean, but my two kind of theories on this are that ZQK isn't in Mexico right now because he got deported back to Brazil. So I'm assuming that could, maybe the org doesn't want to support a team for a couple months in Brazil, in North America, if they don't have their IGL and one of their, most important pieces. Then we also have, Bear. I don't know if he necessarily wants to be playing NA Advanced, but he could be playing like CBCS or some other Brazilian league. And then also because they failed to make the close qualifier, I don't know if like the org's still interested in being in North America because you don't like come to North America just to play Advanced. You got to kind of have other plans. So that's all. We don't really have any. There's not really any facts on the ground, and I've honestly asked around with some of my Brazilian contacts, and no one's really heard anything. Like it's coming as a surprise to everyone. So just something I guess to keep an eye on in the next few days is hopefully we learn more.
Yeah, it's just weird that they're just up and gone because they started like my first indication that something was happening was basically like people posting on like advanced players posting on Twitter like, yeah, we 16-0'd in Imperial, and I'm like, what's going on over here? Are they that bad or something going on? And of course they're just beaming.
Brazilian emo posting or like showtimes on Instagram being like, when are you playing next? It's like, I don't know, like in Brazil, I guess. Like,
yeah.
Well, so
that makes advanced power rankings a lot more competitive now.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun this season when we get to playoffs and we actually don't know who's gonna win it straight away for the first time in like 4 seasons. So moving on, we have 2 roster changes of note this week. At long last, Secret Club have finally stabilized their roster. It's going to be Wolfie, Wolf, Rek, Jitter, and Vic. Which the big takeaway there is Wrath is out of the team after helping them win the Cash Cup and a strong start to the season. With that, there's some kind of additional tangents on this. So that means Rek is out of Choco Check, even though he didn't end up playing for them. That means they're likely going to have to keep using Exotic until they meet their roster requirements. And then also their coach, Ben, apparently has been gone since the end of season 36, and no one bothered to tell anyone. So thoughts on the lineup as a unit?
Well, I mean, now that Wrath has left the team, now we might be able to see a full 5 from them in playoffs if they make it. That'll be nice. It'll be Wolfie and Wolf had a pretty interesting dynamic in one of the previous versions of Secret Club, so it'll be interesting to see how that chemistry carries on going forward. And Jitter and Rek are both actually Jitter, Rek, and Vic are all like pretty young, like up and comers, I'd say. So while I'm not expecting like the best results from them this season, because this season's pretty stacked with even foreign competition, I do want to see what Wolfie can do in terms of making them better.
I will say, like, yeah, I'm kind of drawing blanks in this lineup because it's like an entirely new lineup once again for Secret Club, so we can't really, like, we know the pieces are good, but we don't know how they're going to play together. I gotta say, I think finally Bon Voyage Wrath, like, I think it's just kind of like, I think he just needs to check the fuck out of the CSGO scene because I'm kind of getting tired of gigs every year where he's just a member to some controversy. So obviously, he's famously part of the I'm going to go on vacation during playoffs story. And I'm just kind of done with him. And I want to see what like new players can do now that he's not on the team.
For sure. And I think any one of those players has the potential to kind of step our role.
And then we have a little petite roster change story. Big Chillin have parted ways with Mello and added Braun. And there's apparently going to be an announcement forthcoming for that. Anything?
Actually, I do have something to add to that. So my big takeaway there is bigchillinshop.com.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
That's
yeah,
it.
I think that's kind of all we really need to say. They're not having a great season so far. Braun is maybe like a minor upgrade.
He's an upgrade in terms of experience.
There you go.
And to
That's
be fair
the
to
one.
them, they are 3 games in at the moment. I mean,
Well,
maybe
but
they'll
a
start
group only
pulling
plays
something out of their ass.
8 games, so it's not like they have infinite amount of time to figure it out.
True, but yeah, I don't know. It's like, of course, everybody seems to be kind of pointing them out as like kind of not
9
necessarily a, they're not going to be they're not topping their group. That's for sure. It's just a question of whether or not they're able to avoid relegation, and avoid the relegation tournament and all that stuff. Because that's, they kind of feel like, to me, like with it's a little bit to less of an extreme, but it feels to me like what Third Impact was in season 35. Where
I'm not seeing that yet, honestly. I don't think they've really demonstrated that they're like an ascendant roster.
I think from a perspective of that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to pull a season 35 Third Impact where you stay away from relegation and you survive.
But wasn't the season 35 Third Impact roster the one that had used Eric with all the uppercase letters, and they had to bring back Tom Connors? And
I'm not sure. They had Qualanoob.
And they had Qualanoob, and they kicked him after 2 games. They kicked him in 2 games. What's his face?
Yeah,
the fact that we don't remember his name isn't Fluky. There we go. Yeah, Fluky, that guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess my point really is just that
good analogy.
I just would like to see, I think that they're both at that kind of stage of they're not necessarily in the same position roster wise or anything like that, but from what their goals are here, and I guess that kind of goes from most of everybody in the bottom of Premier, but that would be I would consider that a success for Big Chillin, would be to survive to that point.
Surviving is the goal, and surviving for achievement.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of wraps up most of our stuff this week. We do have 3 minutes and 40 seconds left to go over some matches for this week. So starting off, we have on the B stream for ESL starting on Tuesday, we've got Party Astronauts versus Censored. Jeff annotated this one with Z's, but I personally think this is actually a decent matchup to show where Censored is as a team.
Here's the thing, right? So I put Z's because my brain tells me Party Astronauts should just roll them over, right? But now that you say it, I'm like, okay, well, if they don't roll them over, then I'm kind of gonna be concerned about Party Astronauts. Forgive me, Munster, but this should be a team where your experience as professional CS:GO players should allow you just to, and honestly, as players and as professionals, you should be able to roll over them. And if you don't, I don't care. I don't care what the hype you guys are putting about Censor. This should be a walk in the park for you. If you want to prove you have a chance in play, if you want to prove you're going to go far in playoffs. So you need to bring your A game, and because if you're struggling against Censored, you're not going to be able to beat teams like Triumph and Extra Assault and Pain in playoffs. So put up or shut up.
First it was Koi going to fight with Munster. Now it's Jeff fighting with Munster. All right, we just need a full cage match going. But I'm gonna just flash through the rest of these matches so we have them out, and then we can talk about the ones that we want to come back to. So on the A stream on Tuesday, RBG versus Third Impact. Next up, we have Mythic versus Velaz. I think it'll be an interesting matchup. Check versus SKDC, not really. QC Clan versus Recon 5. Battle of the Battle of the teams that are kind of both struggling at the moment. And I believe Party Astronauts versus PDHM. Then we have RBG versus Censored, Extra Salt versus SKDC, Choco Check versus GGPR, Team 1 versus Pain, which I believe is going to be on the A stream, and then that's on Wednesday. And then we have Triumph versus Extra Salt, which is maybe happening on Tuesday. It should be. It's still in the schedule, and I'm probably casting it if it does happen, but it relied on Triumph losing in the RMR today, so they did, so it probably is going to happen, but we'll find out. So any of these matches really stand out to you as gonna be really interesting to watch with our final minute and 20 seconds?
Yeah, go ahead.
RBG versus Third Impact, 100%. Both of them are basically your up-and-coming strategic teams. Like, they both really hard grind those demos. They work really hard to play well off of each other. And while RBG should definitely come away with the win here, like, this is going to be good counter. This is going to be quality Counter-Strike to watch. If you want to watch a demo regarding NA Tier 2, that's going to be your demo.
All right. And then, Jeff, do you have a match?
Well, obviously, of course, Shotgun Check versus GGPR, because my good friends at Eminem's Esports will be playing my good friends at GGPR Esports, and it should be a real barn burner. And here's hoping, both teams should win these. But unironically, let's not be completely out of school here. I want to see what Lowrider can do with the new lineup, because as much as we talk shit about them on the show, I think Lowrider is a good IGL, and I'm excited to see what he can do. And I like Sharky, and he has a cool name. But if you want to see like a match, I think is gonna be a real barn. One versus Pain, Brazilian rivalry. One are trying to prove that they can take on Pain, and it should be a good time all around.
All right, and then with the final 5 seconds, Triumph versus Extrasalt, because I'm probably casting it. Go watch it on my YouTube or on my Twitch channel.
Yeah, I mean that's like that's the fucking free space on the bingo card. Is when two of the best teams in NA are playing each other. So
yeah. All right, everybody. Well, that is it for tonight. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of the Max Runs 30 podcast. Please make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, just leave interactions so like we get views, because that helps us like not feel terrible about making a podcast every week, especially with Koi over here. But
yeah.
So be sure
we promise we'll think about making timestamps for you guys, because I know that's all you really care about.
Yeah, timestamps.
Even though the show is literally only half an hour of your time, you want to know
30 minutes.
You want to know you want to know like the 5-minute segment shit on Chocolate Checker. So like I'll be sure to mark that out in big fucking goalposts for you guys. All right.
All right. Well, that's the show for this week. Thank you, and tune again next time. Bye-bye.